So I started realizing that if you can just find strength just a little bit longer, you will have a crew of people following you along the way.
And that is another thing that no one can ever teach you. Because you're going to have to learn that on your own. You're going to have to figure out how to pull that energy out of your mind on your own. There's no book you can read that all of a sudden I have it. I've got the technique now. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
No, it's a grind that you have to start and finish on your own.
Let me tell you a story about an illiterate kid. Had guitar lessons at 3, living stateside at 6, bought a philosophy geek. Thought he was born with a gift, but over 20 years later thought I could no longer subsist. While destroyed by misfortune and locked down in his crib in the shadow of wealth, where the Curragh banks lived, a single flicker of hope was all that kept him awake, burning all through the night. Every second of every day the script changed underneath, but very few could see the story was telling himself. Friends just couldn't believe he was on another planet station they couldn't receive, and it never shut off. An eternal heartbeat, an undeniable call, an unquenchable flame, an unavoidable path. Deltoric quest for his age, he left the valley of lost frequency tuned to perceive, hacking into commits and finally bridging the breach. The code world in his mind, like first learning to read, like a lifetime of red suddenly turning to green. So he opened a branch and turned over a leaf, auto passing the test like a database seed. A book that never been authored, movie never been played, a journey no one else living would ever seek to replicate, song that never been sung, vision he could retain. So it consumed his mind like a triumphant parade. All the Christmas and Easters and birthdays that he missed, paid the isolation price to become the man that he did. So a piece of advice, you should take care what you wish. When you pick up abroad, then you better not miss. Could be in China or Chile, or in mountains of mist, walking into the fog, or ending up a night of with. But I've got no regrets that it was written like this. Quantum entangled in, will crafted threads are in synths. In the mountains or seas, the battlements or parapets. In the words of my friends, the ribonucleic helix. In the dance of the stars, or eternity's whim. Cause it's all in my mind, in mithril titanium. You know, when I was about 9 I learned to play violin. You consider it in this song played by a computer sim. So whatever the cost, whatever the sin, whatever the angels on the head of a pin, whatever the rush, whatever the strings, whatever the throne, politicians or kings, whatever the price, death comes from within. So I'll burn it all down, but I'll never let them win.
If you keep on attacking something, nothing wants to stand in front of anything that is relentless. Nothing.
No management, no studio, no corporate sponsorships, no old money connections, and no Andreessen Horowitz, no mentor, no prior art, and no industry experience, no safety net, no backups, and no certifications, no rule book, no limits, and no establishment. Just a single laptop and syndication of speech. They say that changing the world, that's maybe not realistic. Dying a day at a time in siren songs of indecision. The prophet Isaiah Sid Meier's civilization. The Manhattan bomb, knowledge versus imagination. You might be missing my message.
There will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
Coming for you, banks.
Increasing the block size to 32 megabytes right now. What would be the top 5 arguments that would get hurled against me?
Oh, that's a good one.
There are a few that the big blockers got right.
Ching, like all these coins splash into the wallets of all the winners. I love that.
There's a new threat out there. It's crypto.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. This is episode number 104, CTV Soft Fork and BTC scaling featuring Moonsettler. Today is Saturday, the 13th of January, 2024. I'm your host, Jeremy. Jed is doing the producing, and today we're starting with a special pre-announcement kind of thing, which is Jonathan Silverblood, Ryan Giffen, and I have teamed up to host a physical meetup in-person event called BCH Bliss for the 2024 Jessica upgrade. It's going to be in Slovenia, in Ljubljana. I'm still not able to say that quite properly. Ljubljana, Slovenia, on the 14th and 15th of May. Entry to the event requires 1 of 100 Jessica NFTs, which will be on sale on TapSwap starting tomorrow, Sunday, the 14th of January at midday UTC. There's more details on the website, bliss.cash, www.bliss.cash. And we will be discussing this in greater detail on the next episode. There's still a couple things that are getting arranged in terms of like the speakers and the link to book in at the hotel and stuff like that. So it's not all 100%, just ready yet, but I thought let's get it out while we had an episode of the show anyway. So I'm really hoping to sell out these 100 tickets and have a pretty cool event for the upgrade. There's got some pictures of the different Jessicas on the slides. And I hope everyone is excited and thinks it's really cool. Again, we'll talk in more detail about it next week. Moonseller, do you have any thoughts on Bitcoin meetups? Have you done a bunch of them? Have you been to like Bitcoin Miami or any of those big conferences?
I'm trying to just not show my face in relation to Bitcoin. It might be ridiculous to some people, but I think the future is going to be at one point pretty nasty for people who associate their face with Bitcoin holding, and I also see how you can easily, like, I don't know, vandalize or abuse someone when they do that. And I kind of try to keep my profile to be a collection of my ideas, and if someone wants to attack me, then they have no choice but to engage with my ideas. Therefore, they can just get personal, because that's annoying and frustrating, and this whole thing that we are doing is stressful enough. So there are many reasons why I'm not going to any live events.
Fair enough. Okay, well, there you have a wonderful advertisement. Come to BCH, please. It'll be amazing. But I totally understand that as well, too. For many years, many years, I was the exact same. And in hindsight, I'm kind of glad. Like that definitely has its pros and cons. And obviously, it's very in the ethos of cryptocurrency to be anonymous or pseudonymous and to speak on the strength of your ideas and without being worried about personal attacks at any level, right? Certainly being in crypto is, a bit on the outside of the accepted system. So, taking some risk, whether or not you're, however, to whatever degree you're involved. So yeah, absolutely. I hope everybody can come to this event, and that's why we're doing the NFT sale with TapSwap. You don't even have to use your real name, all of that. But hopefully we will see a few people there. Right. So our guest today, Moonsettler, is a BTC developer. I guess generally a Bitcoin developer. No reason couldn't do any dev on any other chain if it felt like it. And an advocate for CTV. Welcome to the show, mate. How did you get into Bitcoin?
Hello, guys. Yeah, it was a very unfortunate thing for me that when I actually first met Bitcoin, then I had zero disposable income. I only had that, and like I think for the first 2 years I was like hell-bent on trying to figure out how could I mine Bitcoin profitably, but it's a very unfortunate situation that I just couldn't. Like, it was impossible. And frankly, back then I did not count on Bitcoin being tens of thousands of dollars, because if I did, then it would not have been a question, right? So even if you are mining completely unprofitable at those levels, I mean, you would have made off like a bandit. But there was no guarantee, right? So in the early days, I think it was maybe late summer 2011. Satoshi already left. I read an article about that and the speculation, and then I looked up Bitcoin, and that's how it was started for me. And I was very much fascinated by it, right? The philosophy and everything. But again, I had no money to put into it for a very long time. I had to get my life in order. So
Yes.
that was unfortunate for me. Yeah.
And then you've stayed involved pretty much since then, or like many people who've been involved, myself included, for that long, they have a couple of years where they drop out of the scene and they come back, or you just been in the whole time?
I was not in any social media. It was like a policy for me to not even have a pseudo anonymous presence, even like for a lot of time. I tried to be like completely unknown, and on places like Fortune, that's the default. It has like this strong unknown culture, and the name thugs are actually are despised and ridiculed, and I'm more comfortable with that thing, and for me that you have to have a pseudo identity, right? Even that's uncomfortable, really. But I had to, because you can't really have any serious discussion on places like this. They have no memory. You don't have a filter for who you want to engage with, and who have valuable ideas and stuff like that. So it was completely dysfunctional, waste of time in a sense. But that's more my speed in general.
Yes. Yeah. No, it makes sense. And I think it's funny that because like you had many years of staying off the radar, and I did as well too. And I think a lot of people who join Bitcoin today kind of struggle to understand, like maybe they think back, oh, I heard about it, it was involved with drugs, and it's sort of like in hindsight they can think, well, it seemed sketchy, but probably it was fine, and now like it's all okay, a lot more people know about it, and the risk is just spread out across everyone, right? But I think it's hard to get across to people that at that time, like people like Vitalik, for instance, who were like way out there, making a huge racket about cryptocurrency, like everywhere they went. There's a reason a lot of the OGs were much more on the down low at that time, right? And it's just the changing environment and the gradually growing acceptance. Suddenly, you have all these people popping out of the woodwork. I remember there was a classic moment from Cyprian or Vin Armani where he said he was engaged in when BCH and XCC were splitting, right? They're having a civil war. And he said that he was caught off guard because he had been working in the community or whatever. And then Mark Demisel, who's this other, well-known Bitcoin casher, he just like popped out of nowhere from Vin Armani's point of view. It was like, who is this guy? He just came from nowhere. I don't think he's that legitimate, blah, blah, blah. But the reality was that Mark had just been like sleeper agent the whole time until his presence was needed. And then he just sort of popped into existence on the main crypto timeline, right? And I feel like that's the same way I've operated, and maybe you have too, right? So you never really know, like that community of OGs, there's a lot of them floating out around there that just only show up on the radar once they choose to, right?
Yeah, I think probably the vast majority of Bitcoiners are completely off the radar, so to speak. I mean, maybe they are not unknown to the actual spooks, the agencies. I mean, it's pretty damn hard to have such a tight OPSEC that some national security agency can't find you. And a lot of us were kind of careless in the early days with our personal data. I'm afraid that we left breadcrumbs and stuff all around, and it's probably not impossible to find most of these people, but they do not advertise their holdings, their thoughts, their plans.
Yeah, and that's a classic well, I would say in one sense there's also a decaying value to information, right? So even if there was, like, for instance, tracking down Satoshi, like now would be so difficult. Like at the time, if you had been monitoring and stuff, maybe he slips up, maybe he makes a mistake, maybe you get, I don't know, an IP log or something. But now, like, and especially the way we're sort of surveilled in today's day, 10 years ago was very different, or at least it felt that way. I don't know if you agree, but
Yeah, it was the Wild West. I was completely amazed by how you can just not give out any personal identifying information, just find some random throwaway email address, register anywhere, and start using Bitcoin and buy stuff with it, or buy it or whatever. Of course, the fiat rails always had this problem that you had to send the money from somewhere. They can actually connect that to your. My first ever Bitcoin purchase was back then. I was still in this uber paranoid phase. I only bought from Bitcoin ATMs. I ate that 5% markup, and I only bought from ATMs with cash. And after a while, it got old. You only could have a tiny amount, and sadly, even that went away. Sadly, I think right now almost no ATMs can be purchased from without some form of KC. They at least require a phone number, and the phones are, especially here in Europe, are very, very cumbersome to get on. And yeah. So things changed, but I really like that Wild West, that non-regulated, unregulated, flying under the radar Wild West thing, but it sadly went away.
yeah. Well, I'm hoping that we can do at least something to bring it back in a world where we got crypto to majority adoption. Hopefully, it would help to curb the sort of, ever increasing expansion of state, because all this surveillance, it costs resources, right? They can't just do an endless amount of it. It's only the amount that they have to pay various, civil servants and blah, 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 like maintain all the infrastructure and all the connections behind the scenes and stuff like that. So if the money was taken out of the hands of just infinite fiat printing, right, that I feel like that would create a trend in the opposite direction, or at least I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, I kind of think that they were very clever in how they attacked this entire thing, because forcing people have this natural tendency to use larger institutions or exchanges, because they feel safer. They feel safer the larger it is that they are dealing with, even though it is, of course. I think MTGOX was the largest at its time when it went belly up, and the FTX was close to being the largest. Maybe it was the second largest when it imploded. So it's not actually a real safety, but they somehow feel this, probably from the fiat world. I don't know, that the bigger is more safe than the sketchy little things. Even though it might not actually be true, but people feel this way, and it's very easy to find these guys. Like, the bigger you are, the harder it is for you to resist this thing. And for a long time, for example, BitMEX was successfully playing the regulatory arbitrage, and they were dodging this thing, and they got even them. And that was the signal for me that, damn, they got BitMEX. This is not going to end well. And then one after the other, all of these exchanges, all of these platforms just bent the knee to the US regulators, and they start here. And then if you combine this dragnet surveillance that you can very easily do on blockchains, because they are pretty much, almost all of them are pretty much open, combined with this KC data and the KCML process is enforced on all entry and exit points, you basically have no privacy in this context, because even if you personally have like good OPSEC, you will just glow in among all the known people and the transactions. So this is very sad how things are ended up, and I think it's the original sin. Like, we should have just said like no to KC and make all the exchanges bankrupt who started complying. And then it would have been a very different world, I believe, because then all the successful major exchanges would have been on KC, and the entire thing probably would look very, very much different. But sadly, that opportunity was missed. Most people choose convenience and their false sense of security, and basically we are in this situation where it's very much likely that they will clamp down on peer-to-peer transactions and exchanges as much as they can. And pretty much evidently they want to herd everyone into regulated on and off ramps and potentially into custodial pools of liquidity. Yeah.
Do you think that was like feasible? I mean, I like the sentiment that maybe the community could have been stricter about fighting back about KYC, or that maybe, like you're saying about the ATMs, that also rings true to me, because there was ATMs right in Canberra in Australia where I was, and there was at least 2 different ones. I've got a photo of me at the pub, the rugby union pub, standing next to this ATM that I was so excited to see, and my friend and everybody else was like, "What is this?" Like everybody just completely ignored it. There was one, and there was also one in the city center, but I think they're both gone now, because that was like everybody had this idea. Oh, I'm going to do a Bitcoin ATM company. It was the thing to do. Like so many different people popped up doing it all over the world. But the regulators in basically every country just stopped it, as far as I'm aware.
Yep. Yeah, that's the problem, right? If you have a physical place that is, someone can be held legally liable, responsible for what's going on, you have a huge problem. So I think ATMs probably would have gotten anyhow. And it's very hard. Like places like local Bitcoin would have maybe fought for longer than centralized exchanges, because really people are doing peer-to-peer stuff, and if they somehow made it somehow so that they can dodge the whole banking regulation by explicitly being non-custodial and all that stuff, or found jurisdictions where they can be forced to comply instead of just bending the knee immediately and forcing it on their users and stuff like that. I think we could have fought harder, and there would have been jurisdictions where these exchanges would have been forced to go. Like if the people abandon them when they try to comply, then the game is to do maximum non-compliance, right? Do everything you can to not comply and seek out, and it is a profitable thing. It could have been actually very good for a few countries to provide this safe haven, because tax revenue and the money flowing through is generally a positive thing for a country. So
I agree.
I think it could have went differently, but people are people. Like 90, I don't know how many % of people don't give a flying fuck about privacy. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality. And as Bitcoin went more and more mainstream, I guess it was unavoidable that we became full of sheep, and the original cypherpunk ideology and attitudes, this fuck the state, don't collect my data attitude, just got diluted to the point where it was economically insignificant. So I have no doubt a lot of people, just immediately closed their accounts and said fuck you, but it was probably economically insignificant. That is why the exchanges found it easier to bend the knee than to fight back, which would have been costlier and potentially not even successful for all of them.
Well, it's true, but I mean, I agree with you, but I think that it's a two-sided problem, right? Because at the same time as you and I are sitting here lamenting, okay, damn, that was the good old days when you could just get on whatever sketchy exchange. At the same time, those guys were like rugging like crazy, right? Okay, and now, I'm not saying that doesn't still happen. Like, obviously, you have FT. Now it's a different kind of scam, right? Now it's like a politically connected
But
scam.
it was also good. It was also good because you know that those guys are sketchy. So you didn't just send them hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever. I mean, depending on your net worth, right? But
I
you
was
only
bowling
send
out,
them,
dude. Like,
yeah,
don't know
only
about you,
send them
but
only send them the amount that you are willing to lose, that you are able to lose, and just take self custody as soon as you can. Like, just going get out as fast as you can. That would have been the game if you only have sketchy exchanges, right?
yes. Yes, and that's right. That's how it was. So I guess you didn't have, well, it's kind of like the ultimate, not your keys, not your coins lesson was just people getting burnt like left, right, and
Yeah.
center, which still happens to these days, but sometimes it's like you need the harsh environment of the desert, breeds the toughest warriors or something.
I had an empty Gox registration, but I never bought anything there. So it's funny that I had an account but never got rugged by them.
Yes, I did not have an account. I never signed up to Mt. Gox, but I was in I was in China and I helped these Chinese guys who were doing arbitrage from the price was so inflated on Mt. Gox probably because they were scamming at a certain point. But they were trying to like figure out how to wire money, to their relatives who were in San Francisco or whatever.
I felt like it has had this feeling of Darwinism and Wild West, and I minded that people got rugged less than what is going on right now. Right, this over compliance and brutally invasive data collection and disclosures and not just to the authorities, because these always get leaked due to incompetence, these databases. And it's such a horrible world we live in where data is used to identify you and to authorize things, and this data is completely out of your control. Like, absolutely, once you give it out, you have zero control over it. And it's just a nonsense to anyone who deals with cryptography.
Yes.
Anyone from our world, it's complete nonsense that you are forced to give out identifying data that can be abused and can be used to harm you, and you have zero control over it. It can be leaked. It always gets leaked, and the criminals have these giant databases, and they are data mining the shit out of it and using your personal identifying data for their shit. And there is nothing you can do. There is no take back. It's just a horrible system.
Yes, exactly. And I guess that's why we're here trying to make an alternative. But it's crazy because, like you say, the criminals, in my mind, like you're dealing with two batches of criminals really when it comes down to it as well. So it's a pretty rough spot to be trying to protect individuals. Like I was reading the other day some stuff about GDPR and the principles and all that are like only collect the minimum amount of information and blah blah blah. Like that's in theory, in the law, in practice, it doesn't really
Have
work
you
out that
ever
way.
managed to get a GDPR data deletion? Have you ever got any other answer from that they can delete your data? Sorry.
Well, that's the thing. So where I'm working, I think we've had a couple people write in and say they want to be deleted, and we go through, we delete it. So at least on our part, we do follow that. But it's only a couple. It's only like a couple people. It's only a minority of people that do that.
No. I mean, I never got an answer back from anyone that they will comply and delete my data. All I got was the excuses why they can't delete my personal identifying data, and I don't think I have. I even threatened. I think it was local Bitcoin. I don't know who it was, but I even threatened them to just report them to the relevant authorities and stuff, and they don't give a fuck.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal because if you're trying to be more anonymous, then having a huge court case is really not going to help you out, is it? So it's like the scales are tipped against you.
Exactly.
Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, here we are, at the start of 2024. We got to check in on the price. The big news this week, speaking of custodians, was the BTC ETF, which instead of pumping BTC, it went up from 44-ish K, got up to 49K on the fake news that the SEC said it was approved, but then said they were hacked. I genuinely, I don't think they were hacked. I think the guy posted tweet too early and they were like, shit. And so they had to pretend they were hacked. But anyway, and then it dumped. And now it's like, it got down to 41 or 42K. Now it's, around 43.
I mean, it's not surprising because what really happens on the shorter time frames with Bitcoin is that it's all a scam. Like when it moves up, it probably just moves up to liquidate the shorts. So liquidate the shorts before you really dump, and then you liquidate the longs and tap into the liquidity, because the market maker is going to go where the liquidity is. But before they move the price where they wanted to, first they liquidate the over leveraged. Anyone that is leveraged over 10% is probably going to get taken out. And sometimes even people who are more careful, they just get eaten before the price goes where the liquidity is. And I think from all the smarter people who know what's going on, nobody was expecting like an immediate God candle, or how they call it, the big green dildo. Most people said it will be a sell news event, because it always is. Compared to that, the price is fine, I guess, because what we see is that you had the scam, you had the liquidation of the degens, and we just stopped for now, and it can go lower, it can go way lower, I guess, but generally this looks okay to me. If you look back like the past month or so, this is where we were. So I guess it was just a big leverage liquidation event, and that's it.
Yeah, so currently BCH is $255.63 US cents, which is up a little. One BTC buys 169 BCH, so we're actually up on the ratio. So BCH outperformed BTC this week, and so but ETH outperformed us. One ETH is 10.02 BCH, so we're slightly down on that ratio. So the news was that 11 funds are now live, although there was some drama because some of the funds kind of went live, but then somehow said they were refusing to serve customers. And so it was pretty ironic. Some Bitcoin and some BTC coiners getting a bit upset that the large custodians were not serving people with their Bitcoin, right?
This is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I don't understand who thinks that this is like a good idea. Aside from the people who literally cannot, for whatever reason, hold Bitcoin, they are forced into some regulated construct where they can only buy stuff that is traded on exchanges. And if they are completely unsatisfied with how the stocks perform, which by the way I was, so one main reason that I actually started to use Bitcoin for my own purposes is the math just somehow never worked out for me for retirement. Like nothing really works out, because the inflation numbers are a big scam, and
yes,
they are lying about everything, and the real inflation and the fund fees and all the other expenses and the tax and whatever just eats up your real gains, and you do not actually make headway in real terms. You are always kept in your savings if you are playing their game in the regulated environment. And Bitcoin was beautiful in the sense that it completely broke out of that, right? And of course, I guess everything that goes with it. But I don't actually know how long that can last if people are starting to pour money into these paper products, because frankly, I think paper Bitcoin only increases the supply, not the demand.
Yes.
So it's like a horrible deal, a horrible idea to me. You are basically paying rent on Bitcoin that does not necessarily exist, or have been rehypothecated endlessly, and you are even paying rent on that. So how is this a good idea to anyone? I can't fathom.
Well, I mean, I guess the excitement, and there is somewhat of an upside in the sense that this fund approval adds legitimacy to the sheep, right? Like everyone will be like all those friends and whatever that you've had over the years who are like, oh, Bitcoin, I don't know, it's sketchy, whatever. Like now it's just like there's an ETF, just shut up, like it's over, like it's a mainstream thing, but it's a price not worth paying. Like it's inevitable. It was always inevitable from when Bitcoin was created that this kind of stuff would work its way through, right? The regulated financial system is going to try and get involved, but that like doesn't mean we need to celebrate it or be hoping for them to pump out bags, I'd say.
Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, if it was, of course, like you said, it was inevitable, but it's also horrible given what gave rise to Bitcoin, what made its precursors happen, right? The whole process that people went through, that they tried to solve, was exactly this trusted regulated environment was not actually trustable. Like, people were being rugged constantly at a civilizational scale. And Bitcoin was supposed to be like an alternative. And that whole Wild West period that I'm nostalgic about, that is much dearer to my heart than this bullshit. And I pretty much only see risks and downsides in this, even though I understand people who say that some people in some circumstances cannot hold actual Bitcoin in self-custody, but they can buy these papers.
Fairly rare, right? Like everybody can learn, and even for people, your grandma or whatever, it's still like she can still just operate the same way. There's already family structures, and like you can have some system there. Obviously, we don't in the modern world because people aren't tuned into that, but they can learn, right?
I guess this means people who are stuck in stuff like 401ks that the Americans have, right? These tax advantaged pension type constructs. I think that's what people primarily mean, that there is a lot of money there and that money is captive in that system. And the ETFs bring Bitcoin exposure to that system. But frankly, if you just wanted price exposure, the futures ETFs should be like good enough. And they don't create the same systemic risks. They have the same problem with centralizing price discovery. Like you are subjugating Bitcoin price discovery to this rehypothecating paper Bitcoin bullshit system, and that did not end well for gold, in my opinion.
Yes, and well, I don't think in anybody's opinion. Yeah, it really has to be that the majority of Bitcoin is traded peer-to-peer. Otherwise, the paper market just takes over the spot market, right? So, it's really not great to see in that sense. Do you think there will be a return in the BTC community or even in the crypto community generally to being more concerned about P2P adoption now that this is done? Because there was so much hype and for so many years, when's this ETF, well, now it's there. Like it's kind of once it's over, once the news is over, suddenly it's like irrelevant, it doesn't seem that relevant anymore. Do you think that will cause people to rethink, or is it just going to continue the downward spiral?
I honestly don't know. My big fear is that people will always choose the easiest out of any situation. For example, if Bitcoin fees get like really high and it becomes sticky, the easiest thing to do is just capitulate from self-custody, right? That's the easiest thing to do. That's what I think 95% of the people will do immediately. They will just capitulate and somehow find mechanisms to cope. They will spin new narratives, and we already seen this play out over the years, right? Bitcoin is full of people now who are very very much saying that it was always meant to be that only banks can transact on chain, and then you just going to have a bank account, but at least then they can't can just print to infinity these. I don't understand why they say that, to be honest. Like if you are in a custodial relationship, Fedimints and stuff like that are very, very popular on Bitcoin. Like, that just has fractional reserve and rehypothecation coded into it, in my opinion. Like that, there is no actual relationship between those numbers that people see on their screens and what these entities actually control necessarily. I don't know why they think just because Bitcoin can be transported faster, not necessarily cheaper, but let's say cheaper too than gold, this thing magically goes away. I don't understand that school of philosophy, and sadly, it's very widespread in Bitcoin now. So that's what we are up against. And again, I think people are taking the easy way out, sadly. And the only thing that I think can make them seek an alternative again is when the trap closes, right? So when a bunch of people get rugged in these regulated walled gardens, they get trapped, they get
a shock,
the confiscation or whatever, like things go real bad. That's when you will see a renaissance of people actually wanting to have something that cannot be, in such a way perverted. But depending on how much liquidity is in or out of these things, as you said, the end result will be very much different for Bitcoin in particular.
Yes. So then just quick thoughts on, obviously this being the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Do you think we'll be getting an ETH ETF, a BCH ETF? Sort of seems inevitable to me. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years, 3 years, probably not longer than that. I would guess 18 months, the classic crypto time frame.
I pray for you guys that you don't. that's what I can say. I hope you don't, because it's not a good thing on the long term. It's really just the fiat overlords, the lizards, taking control by the usual means of price discovery and basically just taking over without changing a line of code. These derivative paper constructs and centralized price discovery on these regulated exchanges are all means of control in the end. And if you actually want peer-to-peer cash by any chance still, then you don't want that. Like that's your nightmare.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so I guess we've covered pretty conclusively what the problem is. So let's start talking solutions. Now, you have been advocating very hard over the last, I don't know, year, I guess more, for this BIP 119 check template verify, which is a proposed soft fork to add into Bitcoin BTC. It adds covenants, which is more sophisticated restrictions on how coins can be spent. So for the listeners, if you think of like a multi-sig address, right, where you have, instead of just having you send in one coin and then, to an address and then somebody can send it out, instead you have like a 3 of 5, 5 people all have keys, 3 of them are needed to sign to get it out. That's the sort of the idea of a covenant in a way that people understand, because people always say, well, why would I want more restrictions on what I could spend? Well, it's for scenarios like that, right? So that's just an easy way I've found to explain people. Now, this proposal is quite unique in a certain way because the BTC upgrade and BIP process is quite opaque and also quite deliberately undefined. And so getting something through is a nightmare. And it was proposed in January of 2020 by this guy, Jeremy Rubin, who then got a ton of shit from the BTC community for it, to the point that he said, fuck you guys, I'm out. And he's now been a bit more active, but he's just like faded away from it. But that seems to have helped it in a sense, because the idea persisted and now people are more like, okay, consensus, whatever that means, is a bit more on its side. Can you explain, like, what is CTV, why you think it'll be an answer, and what's going on with the governance?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a magic bullet in the sense that if you activate, then everything is suddenly good the next day, right? That there is no way it will substantially impact the fees, for example, if the fees are too high and stuff like that immediately. It's just another primitive, like check sequence verify and check log time verify. Like we had these soft forks and nobody started to throw hissy fits about them and preach the end of the world. We just had them because it can be useful in the future generally to thousands of developers. It's another tool they can use to build their applications. And CTV is similar. I don't think the multi-sig parallel is good because, and you are absolutely right in that a lot of people just don't like the word restriction. That it makes them feel claustrophobic, even though Bitcoin absolutely does not work without restrictions. Like if anyone could just update the database anyhow, then it would be like a complete mess, and it would be unfit for any purpose. So restrictions in the sense of authorization are very important to Bitcoin. Who gets to update the database, at what cost, who gets to update entries, specific entries, and in which way. These are all forms of restrictions, but the word restriction does not sit well with people. And even though it's technically correct, by the way, so CTV, what it does technically is you basically hash the outputs of the transaction and take that hash and check it with a value in the script. So basically, you can create an address that can only be spent in a way that the outputs exactly match, amount and target exactly match that template. Of course, you can use if statements. So you can use if, let's say, some threshold multi-sig scheme, escape hatch, whatever you want, or it can only go this way. And that's what gives CTV its true power, that it is optional. Like you use CTV in cases where cooperation breaks down a lot of times.
Right. So one of the things that when I was reading it and I was trying to figure out, this BIP, the key point seems to me basically that you've created this template for the transaction, like you said, the outputs. So okay, under scenario A, 1 Bitcoin is going to you and 1 Bitcoin is going to me, and under scenario B, 2 Bitcoins are going to me, and that's just the end of the story. But the key is that the inputs are not predefined. So it's like you're putting half of the transaction, you're locking that in. Because I thought, if you already knew, like locked in a transaction ahead of time, what would be the point of that? But the point is that the inputs are not specified. So who puts the money into that deal is can remain open, right?
You know why they are not specified?
Why?
Because it would cause a hash cycle. It's an NP-hard problem if you wanted to calculate it that way. Like that's the only reason. I mean, a lot of times you could actually like specify the inputs. It's not a problem. You have an idea how the sats would flow exactly a lot of times. I mean, not always. It depends on the application, depends on the contract. CTV can work both ways. That it can work in a way where transaction IDs are predictable. That requires that you commit to, because it commits to the number of inputs. And if you commit to the number of inputs as one, then there can only, for any UTXO, the flow is absolutely predictable. But you can't really calculate the template hash if you have to take this input, which is again a hash, into consideration, because the output of the transaction that it commits to, it would need to be, like I said, it's a hash cycle. You can keep trying to churn it, but you would not probably finish before this universe ends, because it certainly is too young. Like it's, I think people estimate it to 13 billion years, 6 to 13 billion years, and that's just not enough time to calculate such a thing. And so that's the reason why it does not commit, why covenants try to avoid committing to input outpoints. We call the transaction ID and the output index outpoint. So what I wanted to say is CTV is not a recent idea. It's like 6 years old, and Jeremy Rubin has been years ahead in Covenant research over most developers and most people. And still we have this running joke that when you have a nice idea about Covenants, you should try to find Jeremy's blog post about it from 3 years ago, right?
Yes.
And it was not a nice thing that happened to him, because what happens is people, when they're, like I said to you, I think recently, when their enemy heuristics are triggered, the enemy recognition heuristics are triggered, non-technical people can't reason technically. So what they do is, when they want to participate, is they get personal, because that they can do. And if they know your face, they know your name, they can Google you up, they can find whatever stupid thing that you said, that they will use that against you. And Jeremy did say a lot of trollish things, by the way, in the past, and he continues to do so. It's just
this Jeremy guy is sounding familiar.
and I think he founded the digital currency initiative at the MIT that is working on these fat coins now. So
Yes.
that there are these weird things where people can just say Jeremy is the grandfather of CBDC and idiotic things like that, which are not true, and he has nothing to do with that as far as I know. But people can make these connections if they really want to, right? The internet is vast. It's a jungle out there. It's a zoo. There are a lot of people who are very motivated to get personal with you, and they have the means, and it got really personal and non-technical, and that I don't think he was prepared for that, and I don't think he was interested on that, and he felt like the whole process is wasting years of his life, and there are other things he could do. He did the work, he gave us the tools, he gave us the idea, and so he said, okay, that's it, I'm out, do whatever you want with it. And that was unfortunate because, like I said, not everyone understood this in the depth he did. And a lot of times it comes very handy when Jeremy does decide to come in and BTFO some retard who thinks too much of himself and just on technical grounds show him how stupid he is. We always enjoy those moments. And what else to say about that? The interesting thing was about CTV activation attempt in 2022 of May of 2022 is that almost all the pushback was non-technical or technically nonsense. Like technically garbage nonsense, like permanent encumbrance. It's a very hard fight to kill. As far as I can tell, it originates somewhere from 2015 from Gregory Maxwell. Even though he was
classic.
trolling and joking, and probably himself was not convinced that this is a big problem, but his writings set the mood, so to speak, and took the minds down a path of paranoia, and it has been spreading as a meme, and people are really finding it hard to let go that this thing could be used for some government whitelist, blacklist bullshit. Even though we have been patiently telling them time and time again how that is completely unfeasible and doesn't make any sense and inefficient and you can't really do it. These things are sticky and hard to kill.
Yes, no, the BCH community is very familiar with that. So then the two elements to this I thought that were quite interesting around these sort of personal attacks and so forth is that firstly, it sets a terrible precedent, right? Is that nobody else is going to want to make a BTC upgrade BIP or blah 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 propose things if they're going to get just mobbed by these like screaming vultures or whatever. And the second element though is that then after he withdrew from it, that seems to have helped the proposal itself because it carried on a bit, and then that sort of convinced some people in BTC have this very, strange mindset that it's got to get into consensus with nobody in charge of it. Like they don't really understand sort of personal responsibility or anything. And it seemed to have helped in that regard. So what are your thoughts on those elements?
I think it helped that he took his person out of it. That definitely helped because, like I said, like the vast majority of the attacks were personal. And that he Jeremy withdrawing from that was like just taking the wind out of that sail completely. And also one pushback against this was that we are not doing forks that are like one-man army, single-man projects, even though that's how Bitcoin started, right? So Satoshi did not ask for permission. He did not ask for opinions. He did the stuff the way he thought it should be done, and people had a choice, either like accept it and run it, or just ignore it. That was their choice. That is Bitcoin's origin, but nowadays a lot of people hold the view that no fork should have like a single champion who also is the idea man, and so they think it should always be a group effort. There is an ideology attached to that I'm not sure I buy into, but there is some twisted logic. But that was one pushback from certain people that it shouldn't be like a one-man project. There should be more developers involved, more IC, more all that stuff. and then
Yeah.
things should be like more widely discussed and more widely looked upon. The problem is that you can't really force developers to look on something. Like if their life is busy, if their schedule, if their plate is full, or they are like detached from all this because they've moved on with their lives, maybe they are sitting on coins from early days that have went up like 4,000x or something. Maybe the whole idea of engaging in any fork debate is not appealing to them. They just want, some chill, and they want to enjoy life. They want to spend time with their kids. Maybe they are having new kids, all that stuff. And it's very easy for them not to pay attention, and you can't really expect them. It's not like they are paid to pay attention. It's not their job, and you probably couldn't even pay them enough in a lot of cases, right? That's not why they are doing it. You have this weird situation that everyone expects the core developers to pick up on good ideas and support them and engage with them. And if it doesn't happen for whatever reason, the default heuristic is that it was not such a good idea after all. And that's why I personally feel that core developers like really dropped the ball with Bitcoin recently in the past like 7 years, because fundamentally Bitcoin was not scared, ownership was not scared, and a lot of time passed, and the regulatory environment is getting more and more and more hostile and overbearing and generally a hindrance really to everything that we set out to do with Bitcoin. And
Yes.
and it feels like we have wasted time, like a lot of time, and a whole bunch of people who do not have the same perception are asking the question, my favorite question that almost sends me, to chew off their face. What's the rush? What's the rush? What's the rush?
What's the
Everything
rush?
is fine. So yeah, that's my favorite question. What's the rush? So it takes years. It takes years to activate a soft fork. It takes years to develop the applications that we need to develop. It takes years for people, the ecosystem, to adopt them with confidence. So we are talking about like 10 years before it really takes effect. And in 10 years, the entire regulatory framework can completely turn into a full chokehold, because it's almost as is right now. They are moving forward, and they are trying, always squeezing a little bit more, always removing your opt-out, your hope for self-sovereignty. They want to close the escape hatch. Like I think Lagarde said that if there is an escape hatch, then it will be used. They don't want you to use the escape hatch.
Yeah.
And Bitcoiners in 2017, right, they decided they don't want to go down the large block scaling path, which was the easiest, simplest way to increase the number of people who can hold their own keys. Mm-hmm. Most Bitcoiners today are skeptical that we can actually do that right now. That the regulatory hostility will not come before the infrastructure is actually supportive. The worldwide broadband internet infrastructure gets decentralized enough for such a thing. That's kind of, I think, the more technical how do you say, opposition to just increasing the block size. That the blocks are already too large for certain alternative modes of propagation that we don't think they can just simply censor. And
yeah,
on the other hand, it was never meant to just stop there. I don't believe so. So I have been, again, watching Bitcoin since like 2011, and I don't accept this new narrative that it was always meant to be banks. It was always meant to be just high-powered money for institutions on chain, and everyone else should be in custody. I don't buy that. I don't think that's a sensible thing to do. And I think it will yield horrible results.
Yeah, so when it comes to CTV, the main, what I see happening is kind of the same thing with drive chains, and maybe with some of these other proposals, is that everybody says, well, why do we need this? And there's basically always two answers. It always comes down to the same two things, which is scaling and privacy. That's the two things that always get brought up in every, upgrade or something, because that's like something that even if the BTC community aren't like serious about making any moves on this, they at least like those ideas, those words. They will agree we should do something about that. We can't, or at least some of them, that will do something about it, right? So Do you think if CTV got implemented, it would make a substantial difference on that front? And also, like you said, that would maybe just be one step kind of in the process, right? It's not
Yeah.
that and finish. So what else would be needed or related, do you think?
Yes, yes. I certainly think it's the first and most logical step for the simple reason that it is extremely low risk. Like we know that now that it is very safe. It has been through the gauntlet. It has been bike shed to death, and it does give you the ability to prove to someone trustlessly something similar to a pre-signed transaction. Like it creates something similar to pre-signed transactions, but it is confirmed. It cannot be double spent in any way. It's not like a pre-signed transaction where you have to prove that you deleted the key, right? And you can't just double spend someone for them to, or the easiest thing to do is like you are getting into some multi-party computation thing, right? And you are both using your keys, and that's why he knows that you can. But it's an extremely interactive process with a lot of run trips, a lot of failure possibilities. CTV makes this cheaper for on-chain validators, cheaper in on-chain cost, on-chain footprint, and non-interactive. Like both parties can calculate the same template hash, and there is no reason for them to exchange signatures, do any multi-party computation, because they both know how it should be looking, right? And when you sign over a transaction amount, sign over some amount to this new contract, you just won't do it unless it's the same hash as you expect. And these can get very complex. Like you can have multiple statements and a lot of, like let's say, million different CTV distributions depending on some conditions. And both parties can just calculate these things offline. They don't need to exchange all that data. They don't need to exchange all those signatures. So that's the real power of CTV, that it just super simplifies this thing and makes it more efficient in these cases. And in itself, it gives us a lot. So CTV is very useful, general primitive. We have like 12 use cases where it makes things more efficient. But we are now pushing the LN-Hans proposal. That's how we call it. LN stands for the Lightning Network, and Hans, is basically a claim that it will make the Lightning Network more efficient, a lot more efficient, a lot better, and a lot more scalable. Because Lightning never scaled the ownership thing. It never scaled how many people can hold their keys on chain. Even though it might be argued that it scaled the TPS, like how many transactions you can do, let's say in a year, if you can hold your keys on chain. Let's say Lightning scaled that. Again, some people say it's a complete failure and it should be abandoned. Some people say, yeah, there are problems, but we can fix them. Give me a few more years. Opinions vary on this, but I think it's pretty clear that we could have like hundreds of TPS out of Lightning if we wanted. Like if you just wanted to run like a demonstration of it, we could easily show that it does 100 TPS. And that's a big deal, because you would need very substantial block size to do that, and we can do that with basically 1 megabyte main block.
That's with CTV activated, you mean? That you could get?
No. Right now you could.
Okay.
Right now you could do 100 TPS with Lightning, but again, that does not really scale. That only like 10 million people, 10, 20, maybe with some heavy optimizations, 100 million people could use Bitcoin in a self-sovereign way. Maybe. I'm a bit skeptical about 100 million. I think if you allow for future optimizations and stuff, then 20 to 100 million. And that's the current limitation of the Bitcoin network. People who are technical understand this. Sadly, the non-technical people have been fed like some form of a falsehood or lie or a false image, right? They have been fed that the Lightning Network scaled. Bitcoin shitcoins are not needed. It's all bullshit. Because, it was a common critique on Bitcoin a few years ago that it doesn't scale.
Yeah. Well, on this show,
yeah,
like on this show, I've been very critical of Lightning Network and obviously the Bitcoin Cash podcast. We've had a number of guests come on and say, from a BCH sort of perspective, Lightning's bullshit, it's never going to work. It was always a distraction and a ploy and stuff like that. So and like you say, there's even in the BTC side, especially now, there's more of a spectrum of opinions on it. So since you're on the show, I just thought it would be really good for my listeners to be able to hear the other side of the argument. Sounds like you are a bit more optimistic about Lightning Network, and can you just dig in on that a little bit?
Okay. So yes, lately a lot of people came out, broke ranks, so to speak, in Bitcoin and said Lightning is garbage. It has fundamental issues we can't fix. But other people who are deep into Lightning development are saying that's not true. We can fix these things. Like maybe it takes a few years, we can fix them. It's not complete garbage. And even if like end users can't use Lightning directly, even if the dream that people would be self-sovereign, I mean, there are issues with the hot wallet thing. Like every people running a Lightning node at home and keeping all their wealth in hot wallet, and the burglar that goes in, like I don't know how they call it in English when you just jack the power cable and attach an external power source and just take the node with you. I don't know if there is a funny practical word for it, but you can do this, right? You can take a Raspberry Pi node, under power, just pocket it and go away with it. And if someone has like millions of dollars on it, then that can be extracted. Like you cannot touch a debugger.
Physically stealing a Lightning node.
Yeah. I mean, you can do it. You can do it. Why not? I mean,
Well, just saying, this is some next gen like crime. If you have people break into houses like at gunpoint, like forget about the jewelry, like give us your Lightning node.
Yeah. Exactly, and in a lot of cases, I mean, that you only need to do that if they are using full disk encryption, and you can retrieve this data at rest. But I'm telling you, most of the Lightning nodes are not such protected, because it makes booting them up hard. Most of these are devices where you log in through a network connection to a web surface or something, or SSH into command line or something, and you can do that if it requires like a boot up password. You would need to attach a keyboard and type in the password, but they don't even have a proper display in most cases, right? It was not designed. It was designed to be like a micro server, micro web server kind of thing. And again, against cyber threats, I mean, we know that everything, every CPU, every hardware device, every operating system is just full of zero-day vulnerabilities. These are a lot of times run on hobby computers, not even real computers where you can talk about security at all. And we can't really talk about security with real computers. Like the whole Intel chip is just one giant backdoor with that Intel management bullshit. Like I don't know how many unfixable meltdown and heartbreak, and I don't know, whatever, you just get these horrific exploits that can be remotely executed on your computer a lot of times, and they completely bypass all attempts at security at the OS level. And so the whole thing is nightmare. Having hot wallets is like not something that we can probably do going forward, unless something fundamentally changes, but it doesn't seem like it's changeable, because it would require more capital than how much anyone can throw at it. If Jack Dorsey threw all his personal wealth and all his companies at trying to make an open source phone that does not have backdoors, I think he would not make it. Like he would fail.
Right, but this is hang on a second. So this is a big issue with the Lightning Network, but to a certain extent, that's also true of mainnet, right? These same hardware compromises.
Everything where you have a hot wallet, sadly. So if your keys are hot, then you have this issue that you are open to. These are internet connected devices. That's the big problem. You have internet connected device. Your keys are hot, and they can be stolen at rest. But even if you have full disk encryption, someone can just steal them powered and then extract your keys and your wealth. So this is a fundamental issue with the whole idea, and probably we can make progress on this over the years. Like I said, first things first, you have to full disk encrypt. then maybe people need to booby trap their lightning nodes. That if you open the enclosure where it is held, then it depowers the device, and the full disk encryption and the booby trap together makes it impossible for a thief who doesn't know exactly how it is booby trap. I mean, it's not a Mission Impossible spy movie, right? Just a random guy tossing your place and opening a closet, and boom, power is yanked from the lightning node, right? And then he can't reboot it because he doesn't know your strong password, hopefully. And maybe we can use HSM devices, like very narrow attack surface HSM signers that enforce some policy on routing lightning nodes. So we can come up with science fiction solutions for these that do not exist today, but we know that they can be done. In that sense, not fiction, that we know exactly how to do these things, but they are not existent. So it's not like the Lightning Network is like fundamentally cannot work, but it certainly has unique challenges that original users of blockchains are just not used to, right? Most people quite like the idea that they can receive offline,
yes,
that they have a key, they can have a public key, and their private key can be called, and
yes,
and they can air gap the signing and all those things, right? But again, that doesn't really scale with small blocks.
Right. So what about? Yeah, I mean that's kind of the hardware compromise side of it. What do you make of the common sort of Lightning Network critiques that the liquidity channels and the economics doesn't add up for two reasons? Firstly, is it's just a nightmare to have people in a decentralized mesh network with liquidity only in two-party channels, right? It's just like everything ends up centralizing on one big hub. And then secondly, that obviously, like you sort of alluded to, if the base layer is restricted, then rising on-chain fees are going to sink the channels that you can feasibly run, right?
I think both partially are correct. So I don't think for the last mile, like for the end users, it is workable. It's a very bad idea that you have to allocate liquidity into channels that are not used and required as well. That was the main critique of Burak when he made the ARC proposal, that even though you might need as much liquidity altogether in an ARC pool, it is not logged into individual channels. It can be deployed where it's needed. That's a huge flexibility improvement. And hub and spoke Lightning does not offer you any privacy. Like literally, the LSP will know every invoice that you pay, every Satoshi that you receive, everything that you do. They are at a unique position to report to chain analysis, and you have even less privacy than you have on chain, and you have all these issues. And for that reason, I don't think the current Lightning Network, the current things that people are doing, it's not scalable. For one, on Bitcoin, it's not scalable, and it's not really good for privacy, and not really good for user experience and for security. And it just doesn't seem like a good technical solution. That doesn't mean Lightning is garbage and not good for anything, right? You can always use Lightning to move funds between large pools of liquidity, various forms of pools of liquidity, like Fedimint, sidechains, whatever. And you generally don't want to wait a bunch of time or buy into other networks, do the atomic swaps manually. You just want to scan a QR code and send money. Right? That's a user experience that people expect. Of course, you can do that when you have a homogeneous global network on layer one that is infinitely scalable. You can do that. You can just scan an address, send, pay, okay, whatever. Bitcoin did not choose this path, of course. And we have this issue that we are going to have these pools of liquidity. And you have to have somehow like real-time settlement between them. Otherwise, they all have to know and trust each other. And then you will have the complete SMTPification of the network, right? What happened with SMTP, that in theory, everyone can run an SMTP server. In practice, you will not be able to send emails, right? Unless Google says so.
Yes.
And that's kind of the issue with Lightning, that probably going to exist a scale where it is useful to minimize trust between these entities. But since it does not really scale the end user experience, these pools of liquidity are very likely going to be custodial. if you do nothing. And worst case scenario, it's going to be custodial in a way where the SOTs are not even, SOTs or coins, whatever you want to call them, are not even accountable on chain. So in a Fedimint situation, what you have is basically a trust me bro relationship with a mint. So they are saying, yes, we have under control all the satoshis that people hold in our wallet that for the eCash that we issued, right? And that's either true or not. And knowing human history, knowing financial history, it's going to be true for like half a year or so, and then it will gradually go to hell, probably. And people have all sorts of hopes and dreams of why this will not happen. And of course, yes, a few will fail, but then the survivors will be okay. I mean, that's just not what our financial history shows with banks, to be honest. It shows that if there is trust, it's going to be betrayed. It's just a matter of time. And fractional reserve is the natural state of these things, of these systems. So we would like to offer an alternative where your SOTs are actually accountable on chain. And in fact, if there is enough of them, if you have a large enough stash, then you can push them unilaterally on chain. That's a completely different relationship than you have with basically a bank. If a bank changes the rules on you overnight, the next day you can't unilaterally exit. If you could conjure your money out, they couldn't do that. They simply couldn't change the rules on you, right? That everyone would be just mad and they would just abandon that bank, and then the free market would take care of it because only good banks would hold customer funds. But you can't. Your money is stuck. It's hostage. And with these covenant constructs, you actually have the unilateral exit. It's just a bit expensive, but you can make it. You can make it a lose-lose situation. If cooperation breaks down, both parties can lose money. And that's important because then both parties have a financial incentive to cooperate. And even worst case, if you cannot go on chain, your satoshis are still expressed on chain, so they cannot run a fractional reserve on you. I personally believe that's a huge thing compared to the alternative, that we do not immediately capitulate to a fractional reserve banking system and credit system and whatever derivative system, but instead we are trying to scale in a way where they at least can do that. And worst case, your coins are burned, and the bank is not really incentivized to burn your coins. They would be incentivized to misallocate or steal your coins. There would be a financial incentive if they can do that. But in a covenant scaling world, they can do that anyhow. All they can do is lose money and lose customer trust and lose their business. That's what they can do, but they can't steal, ideally. And that's kind of the situation that we are fighting for. And you understand that this is a far cry from where Bitcoin started out. The original dream was not this, but we had this reality check that, again, in Bitcoin, we are not able to just keep increasing the block size. I know on Bitcoin Cash land, it's absolutely like a baffling statement that you have this scarcity and you have to do these acrobatics and insane complexity stunts because you guys think we will just keep increasing the block size if we have to. I understand that. However, it would be much more funnier if you had to deal with this JPEG spam and BRC20 spam than we, and then see how that goes for you. Because frankly, as I understand, you actually want tokens and NFTs on Bcash, and we very much don't. Most of us don't want them on Bitcoin, but for some reason they want to be on Bitcoin and not on Bitcoin Cash, and this is like a horrible situation for everyone because you don't get to validate the large block scaling philosophy because you have small blocks. Basically, I think Bcash is the smallest block in effect of the Bitcoin forks, and Bitcoin is pretty chunky and way over comfort for us, and there is a huge amount of blockchain data. And the scammers are loving it, and they actually, for some reason, value the scarcity of the block space. Like they think it gives more prestige to their JPEGs or something, and their rare satoshis that it's on a scarce block space instead of an abundant block space. and we have this unfortunate situation where none of us can do what we want, sadly, or what we would have liked to prove, because people just don't oblige.
Yeah, so give me the you identified a lot of problems and issues there and things that could maybe be worked out. So give me the hypothetical moon settler dream scenario, right? If you were made a dictator over BTC today and you were able to do sort of the changes and scaling roadmap and so forth that you want, like maybe you immediately ship CTV, then you have, maybe some other couple of ideas over the next couple of years or whatever it is. How would you play it if you just had unilateral control? Obviously you don't, but if you
Okay.
did, how would it all work out?
Yeah, so Bitcoin, of course, can't have like benevolent dictators. That will never be accepted, hopefully. I I personally would very much like to see how far we can go with actually trying to scale small blocks with Covenant. So my answer would be that Alliance is absolutely like a low risk, high reward thing that we should do like immediately. We should activate it this year. And it might just be too late. So I'm personally a bit of a doomer. I'm very black-pilled on this whole thing. I think we have wasted too much time, and now they are moving to then they fight you phase, and they have like infinite money printer, and in general like 100 times more money than the Bitcoin market cap at their disposal, and they get to use their existing police and military violent coercion system for basically no apparent cost to just smack down on anything. And so I think we have wasted too much time. But I'm still like careful about like I'm not in the camp of let's just activate everything. Although on some days I'm so much fed up with the accelerationists and the ossifiers that I say things like, okay, let's just activate opcat and let's just blow this thing up, because opcat is weirdly it's a simple string concatenation operation, but with combination of the other opcodes, it kind of gives us everything in an inefficient way. And then there is no reason to say I don't want to do this or that, because someone can just write script using opcat and Objective or whatever and show that you can do this right now on Bitcoin, but it's like a 1 kilobyte witness. So why not do it with 32 bytes? Tell me the reason why not, but really these three opcodes, that is check template verify, check sig from stack. I think you call that check data sig in Bitcoin Cash. It's largely the same thing. Same things you can do with it. Yeah. And internal key, which is a very Taproot specific thing. Taproot has this internal pub key that gets tweaked with the script hash, basically the masked tree, the Merkleized abstract. I don't know, doesn't come to me what's the exact name, but there is a Merkle tree of the Taproot leaf script leaves, and it commits to the root of that tree basically, and that's kind of similar to pay to script hash, kind of thing. And you tweak the public key with that value, and that's how you get the Taproot external key. That's what the Taproot address is basically. It's like a point on the elliptic curve without the oddity marker, because it always have to be I think it always have to be even. It always have to be 0, 2. So that's omitted. And that gives you a 32 bytes of data, and they form a back 32 address from it, and that's basically your Taproot address. And internal key puts this internal pub key that you can use to, if you know the private key to it, you can use to move your funds without executing any script. It's a specialty of Taproot. And of course, you can always generate that point as a nums point. So you can just hash some value to the curve. And that means it's an unknown discrete logarithm. So basically that means there is no such pub key. You can prove it because you hashed hello world to the curve, and nobody knows the private key to that, right? And that way you can do script only executable taproot addresses. But this internal pub key can be with this instruction, this internal key instruction, which is a 1 byte opcode, can be pushed to stack. And that's very convenient because otherwise you would have to include it basically twice. Because you have to expose, when you execute the script part, you have to expose the internal key anyhow. Otherwise, the whole trick could not be verified. And then you have to just push it onto the stack from the script itself to actually work with it. And the internal key just push it to the stack, so it saves you 32 bytes. There is really absolutely no reason to talk anymore about it because that's all it does. It's a special push operator. And
okay, so hang on. So you get these upgrades in. That adds a lot of scalability to Lightning Network, presumably.
Yeah.
Like you said, optimistically, okay. You're pretty happy with 1 megabyte, or would you also get a block size increase in there at some point?
Not right now. So now, the way this thing looks with the inscriptions and the general spam and the exogenous asset trading on Bitcoin.
Yes.
I am sorry, but I'm kind of ideologically aligned towards Bitcoin being like this this monetary revolution, and I want to support and make it more competitive the native economic use of Bitcoin the token, not random USD or I don't know what other bullshit tokens are traded on Bitcoin right now. Like, I don't want to make more space for that. That's not the purpose of the system, in my opinion. Again, people are free to differ on this, and everyone can have their own ideas. I'm in the camp that actually wants to just make Bitcoin work as money as much as possible and make self-custody the standard. And it's just not conductive. If you increase the block size, you give more space to garbage, and the stop on that will be the same equilibrium on the cost of inscribing the garbage. Right.
Yes.
So probably you are going to over time end up at the same fees, no matter how much block space you give to these people.
You just get twice as much garbage, and it fills up to the same amount essentially.
Yeah. So what I would like to explore is to make people share these UTXOs in a way that they can, because they are many, they are legion, right? They can outbid these quite large and inefficient transactions. Like, we want to outbid inefficient use of block space. How I can do that? I can put 1,000 people into a single taproot, single sig address, and I can use like 160, 200 V bytes to move that over to a new address. And that can encompass like 100 Lightning channel opens and closes and internal transfers and an internal coin join. And I have used like 200 V bytes on the blockchain. Right? That's roughly the size of a normal normal transaction that is absolutely nothing fancy. And that could make it very competitive on the fee market. And it also gives us like a huge amount of privacy. So anyone doing chain analysis would just see this one transfer and have no idea absolutely what is going on off chain. And that's kind of the part that I wish to explore before we even talk about, block size increase or even talk about other forms of alternative scaling, because it seems like the most robust in the sense that you can absolutely not hold people's money in theory if they have enough hostage, they have the unilateral exit, they can cooperate, and it is costly not to cooperate, and every Satoshi is accounted online. Everyone can check that every Satoshi that they own is actually, how do you say this, is so it's basically is locked into their keys. I don't know how to say that in English.
It's accountable for,
accountable for and actually attributed to their keys, right? So that's an important thing, because if you just show that the money is there, you can show that to 10 different peoples. But if it's their private key that unlocks it, right, it is locked to their public key, then it's infeasible to make multiple people use the same pub key.
Oh, it's like still connected. Yeah, yeah. You're not saying, okay, we've just got a pot of money and these 10 people, but then there's some like custodians or something in the middle. Instead, you're saying it's still linked up.
You can do internal rehypothecation. Yeah, you can't reuse the satoshis. Everything is logged into pods that lead to people's keys, and holding their own keys is what we want to scale. And like I said, even if you can't actually push it on chain because it's too expensive, nobody is really incentivized in trying to do anything funny with it because they can't steal it. The worst they can do is just making you not be able to spend it, but it would cost them money. So I kind of think this could lead to naturally like more cooperation. Again, nobody is incentivized to do silly shit because it's costly. And it's impossible to do rehypothecation and fractional reserve. And I think that's the immediate danger right now. So if Bitcoin is not changed in any way, the path that we are going down is that this reinvention and fast tracking of the banking history of our civilization, and it will end in a few years in some fractional reserve bullshit.
Okay, all right. So I'm, obviously I don't know that I'm personally convinced by this strategy, but I do understand it. I understand kind of what you're going for, right? So this is the game plan. Now walk me through how that's actually going to happen. You made a tweet at the end of last year. I think we even brought it up on the Christmas episode talking about a CTV activation client in January 10th.
Yeah.
As far as I know, that didn't really come together.
We played ourselves on that because I have been an advocate, but again, this is pretty disorganized what we do. Everyone is just pushing what they think, and we are talking, and it's a huge mess. But I was an advocate for CTV plus checksig from stack, but checksig from stack always seemed like something that we will do later because it was just not ready. Like it doesn't have a bit number, it doesn't have implementation, it's not tested, not widely reviewed, unlike CTV. But the two together is truly powerful. It gives us stuff like LN symmetry, also known as L2. That's something the Lightning tribe really wanted. And
so
it gives us the ability to do what I call deferred authorizations that are malleability resistant. SegWit was touted to be like something necessary for the Lightning Network. I'm pretty sure you heard this, that we had to do SegWit to have Lightning.
Yes.
That's bullshit, by the way. That's technically very bullshit, because you can do Lightning quite a few ways, and it's entirely possible that we would have a better Lightning Network if we didn't do SegWit. Instead, we did some Covenant, which, by the way, was proposed. So APO's precursor, Zcash no input, was actually proposed as an alternative by the people who dreamed up the Lightning Network, and people, after spending 7 years on trying to make Lightning work, are now really want to just redo all the work and just replace all that effort with something on completely different grounds, which is quite funny if you think about it.
It'll only take
you might, that might be funny for you, but to us, it's sort of predictable and sad, I guess. But
yeah. I understand that it's more funny for people who were Lightning skeptics all along, but I think it's even funny to people who absolutely bought into Lightning and now are seeing that the developers basically want to throw away everything that was touted as the basis of the Lightning Network, and want to create Lightning channels that are malleability resistant. That could have been done without SegWit, by the way.
Yes.
And these have much simpler internal state machines. They have less round trip. They have less problems with you don't have to do penalty mechanism, which there is the routing nodes. Right now in Lightning, if you accidentally, for whatever technical reason, like you experience the drive failure or maybe try to restore from a bad shutdown or whatever, and your node just for whatever reason broadcasts an older state and someone has a newer state, all of your channel balance can be forfeit to them. A real attacker, of course, would probably spend his entire balance and would only have the 1% channel reserve. So an actual attacker that tries to steal only risks 1%. But people who are innocent and just make a mistake or experience a technical failure actually have the risk to lose a significant amount of their money to the channel peer, right? All they have to do is like somehow broadcast an old state, and that is punishable. And LN symmetry, of course, does not require punishment mechanism because all the states can just naturally be overridden by a newer state. And that means that instead of penalizing, they would just send the newer state by default if this happens.
So are we going to get a CTV soft fork in 2024? What's the game plan if
I hope
if
so.
you can't?
So what I wanted to say, we food gunned ourselves because it's very high value to do both CTV and checksig from stack. But like I said, CTV is very much ready. It's been through this whole bike shedding process for years, and checksig from stack is a new proposal. Now there is a chance that the community will actually get excited about this. The Lightning developers and the core developers will see that this minimalistic, very conservative change to Bitcoin that doesn't really change anything about the trade-offs often touted, the node costs and the network decentralization.
And all that.
You know all that, I guess, for years of debate, and it doesn't change any of that. But we still think it can optimistically like supercharge this thing and scale Lightning and the end user Lightning wallets in a non-custodial way to like a scale of 10 to 100 x. So 1-2 magnitudes more people can use Lightning holding their own keys optimistically, and other stuff, like a bunch of other stuff that we can do with it. And it's super useful and viable. And here comes the real funny thing. We recently understood that it's very, very likely, it's not 100% sure, but it's very likely that LN Hans with these 3 opcodes actually does LN symmetry better than APO, which was purposefully designed for it. And pretty much was a done deal in a lot of Lightning developers' head that we are going to have APO, and that's how LN symmetry will be done. And LN Hans actually seems to be more efficient. Less round trips, less bytes on chain than APO. So it beats it on the home ground. And that's why we are hopeful that people are going to get excited about it. We will see a lot of reviews. The conversation will move along faster, and we can start the activation process this year. However, if this does not happen, like we do not see core developers engaging it, we do not see people reviewing it, we do not see the Lightning tribe wanting it, getting excited about it and pushing for it, then we are back to CTV only.
And then you'd run it back in 2025 if you had a whole year, no progress?
I think I definitely would want to start something this year. I'm willing to give a few months to see how the community reacts to LN Hans. I really hope they will be as excited about it as we are. But if that does not happen, then I'm back to the original plan, which is to release an activation client and try to UASF check template verify.
So you're just going to jam it in there with a UASF, no fucks given? What kind of activation period would it be? One year? I heard Shinobi saying 4 years. I was like, I don't know about 4 years, mate.
Yeah, no. Most people think that's too much, but other people say that the ecosystem needs time to digest these things. Like you can't just blindside them, because if you blindside them, then
they push back.
The instinctual reaction is to push back and to resist.
Yes.
And we don't exactly know what is the tolerance there, because there will be people who will never be convinced. Like we know that there are people who just want to do everything to delay it indefinitely and never let it activate. And we also seen that if activation is not on the table, then nothing fucking happens. Like this is a memoryless process. As some people say, consensus is a flat circle. You go around and around and get nowhere. That's kind of how it goes. The one thing that can break it, and a lot of people disagree with that, but is that you force the issue. Like you actually start activation talks, even though the graybirds, the old guard doesn't like it, doesn't find it appropriate. You say fuck you, because that gets attention.
Yes.
Like there's nothing as I can say. If those people are not paying attention and they are not doing their job, their supposed job, then we have to do something to break the gridlock, because there is no reason to assume that if we do the same thing that we did like the past 2 years, then it's going to yield a different result. In fact, over time, it's going to be harder and harder to change Bitcoin. The situation is going to be worse. More and more new people will join Bitcoin, who will all feel entitled to have a say in consensus and to consent to changes, even though that informed consent is impossible because they just don't have the know-how. They don't understand these things at the depth where you can give an informed consent, right? So the situation can only get worse as time goes by. And that is why I absolutely want to do something in 2024. I kind of, like I said, we foot gunned ourselves with this January thing because LNHANS is so much more valuable than CTV only. Like we are figuring out things with it. We are building the constructs, the contracts. We see how incredibly useful it is. And it's still like 200, 300 lines of code change to Bitcoin. It's still something that you can review in one sitting if you are a core developer. It's not a huge change. Again, does not change anything fundamentally about Bitcoin. It just opens up the door to this huge off-chain scaling, which is, like I said, optimistic. Like it absolutely doesn't work in the worst case situations. It also depends on human behavior to follow incentives and proper incentive designs and proper wallet designs. And again, people just not being assholes in general and mass, like we presume that most people will choose cooperation. If non-cooperation does not benefit them, in fact, it is punishing monetarily. That's the assumption. There is no guarantee to this, to be honest. That's why it's an optimistic protocol, an optimistic scaling protocol, because worst case, it does not do anything to scale Bitcoin.
Yeah. Now, what do you make of the fact I'm intrigued by, obviously, you have sort of the traditional laser eyes / ossifiers / conservative, I guess you could say, Bitcoiners who are not going to like any single proposal. So you've got them, you've got you with the CTV and all of that happening. And then at the same time, you have the Taproot wizards telling the or disrespecters, the laser eyes, to just it's on them to fork off because they're already in the chain. You don't, and then, but hang on, you had Eric and Udi come out just yesterday, which and they've released this new NFT series called Quantum Cats, and the idea is essentially to do marketing for this OpCat change, which you referenced just before. So they've come out on that, and Udi has promised that there would be, obviously whether or not he can deliver on this, a soft fork in 2024. I was expecting them to jump on the CTV train, but now they've gone with OpCat, which is a different thing, and they made a whole like salty website explaining the bit process, except it doesn't actually explain it. It's just full of like in jokes because nobody knows how it works. And so they're kind of just fumbling around, like taking a stab at, well, we've got to do something. So I don't know, they picked OpCat for the meme potential. What do you make of that?
Exactly. Yeah, I love that website, by the way. Like, it's absolutely hilarious. And I did autistically try to play it and of course couldn't finish. Like, I actually flipped the coins, and it's crazy. Like, it's probably close to unbeatable game. As some people suggested, you can use it as a drinking game or something for extra fun at Bitcoiner parties. But I love the vibe. I love I don't mind them trolling. It is true that it is disruptive. It might be disruptive, like taunting the ossifiers, and most of them are actually non-technical, and it might even scare them, what potentials lie in OpCat, which we in the technical community openly talk about, and we are half excited, half spooked by these things. Opinions differ on how much people would take advantage of these things, but we actually enjoy coming up weird and crazy and unexpected things you can do with OpCat. And again, people who are fed up with this great coroning that is going in our world and in Bitcoin as well, right? This overbearing, protective nanny state attitude that certain people even developed in Bitcoin now, that they want to police how other people use the blockchain, right? That's what I call great coroning. That you are not allowed to use unless I approved the way to use Bitcoin, and this whole thing just seems antithetical to Bitcoin to me in a sense. In another way, I understand, like, it is your precious, you put your lives and hopes on it, and you really don't want other people to fuck it up. But I don't think this is the way. That's my general observation, that I don't think policing and coroning is the way, to be honest. I think the incentives should be made right. Like we should empower the users with the right changes to use Bitcoin more efficiently, and then inefficient use will be crowded out through the fees. Like that's the small block scaling paradigm. The base idea is that economically dense use of the blockchain, more efficient use of the blockchain will crowd out the bullshit. That's the whole reason to have small blocks. There is no other reason. I mean, that's not true. There are a few other technical reasons: propagation, validation. Like I said, the hostility from nation states. So that's, forget that I said that. But there is this reason that it is a DOS protection on Bitcoin also, like from just flooding it with bullshit. And we are seeing this, that bullshit is still can take up 90% of the block.
Yes.
Block space, and that's completely surprising to me, to be honest. So I used to be in the moderate block size increase camp.
Yes.
Like a few years ago, I was even tweeting about this stuff, that we are not going to make it with 1 megabyte blocks. That was my understanding when I joined Twitter, that it's just not going to work. Mm-hmm. And I'm very happy that I found an alternative that seemed to solve this current problem as well, because otherwise I would probably just have to sell my bags and say goodbye, But at least I have some.
Well, I want to ask you about that, right? Because obviously we've been chatting away on Twitter and stuff over the last little while. I was curious on, it sounds like you're actually, moving away from any interest in block size increases, but being a dev and obviously having, done, I assume, at least some reading up, what do you make of the current Bitcoin Cash changes with regards to cash tokens and all those other changes? We had a clip of you on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about, that we kept on with the original scaling, plan and stuff like that. What's your view on that today?
Yeah, I personally think Satoshi was a big blocker. When he designed Bitcoin, I think undoubtedly he thought the block size will just keep increasing with demand naturally. That's what he expected. I don't think he thought this whole thing through, or he thought too much of it. And one of the early criticisms was exactly that people thought, man, your system does not scale as well as you think it does. In fact, it doesn't scale at all. But I think Satoshi, when he designed Bitcoin, and more importantly, when he designed like the monetary policy of Bitcoin, I think he assumed that as the subsidy halves, probably block size will double. I personally think that was his expectation. Like the transaction count will grow exponentially, and fees will, even if they are low, they will amount to a lot. I think that was his position. And for a lot of years, I took it for granted that we are going to keep increasing the block size naturally with organic demand growth, right? The problem that happened right now is that it became very clear that you can forget this organic demand growth thing completely if there are other demand for block space that actually is economically rational. So it's not just spamming, it's not just out of spite, it's not just graffiti or whatever, but people expect to make money on it. There is a huge land grab, digital land grab going on Bitcoin right now. People are minting tokens and inscribing stuff, and they are doing this because they expect that in the bull market they can make a profit on that. And that's a completely different situation than from just people vandalizing the blockchain out of spite and paying from their own pocket for basically garbage. So that's kind of what makes me very cautious about doing any block size increase right now. And like I said, I'm sorry that you don't get to validate your philosophy. Like if you got this care
I'm hoping we
picture and
will, though. I'm hoping, you know,
yeah,
at some point we'll be able to create some edge that will give us a spike in demand. So it's on that topic, like what would it take for you to be more seriously interested in BCH or to switch sides? Is there any possible scenario you can see?
yes, I think there is like in 2017, 18, I completely viewed you guys as idiots and the enemy. I was sort of like a frontline infantry in that bullshit on the small block size. And not because I thought we will never increase the block size again. Like back then, I just thought we will do it more moderately and more organically. And yes, back then I thought it was rushing things to increase to 8 MB or whatever. Like it was too soon, and that's not how we should do it. And I kind of was in the camp then that we should make some adaptive algorithm that you are trying to fork in now, and then just set like a price to try to force grow and try to spam. And I had these ideas for a very long time, but I see now that people are willing to pay way more for the block space for this bullshit reason than I ever thought back then. Like I seriously did not think that people are going to pay hundreds of satoshis of per vbyte for these things to inscribe these JPEGs. I found that like impossible, really, at least at any sustained period. And right now we see that it is pretty sustained for now, and it's still a bear market. I don't know what will happen in the bull market. I think we just have to see if this whole thing survives the bull market, because then fees in the mania phase, they really go high, and yeah, it's interesting. Like my view on this changed a lot in the past 2-3 years. That's what I can say. And the only reason I came to Twitter, by the way, was exactly that I saw that the narrative shifted in Bitcoin land to not ever having a block size increase, and that was a complete surprise to me. Like I was baffled. I felt kind of betrayed. Like I didn't know what to make of this, because again, I always took it granted that we will keep increasing the block size with demand and as technology grows and all that stuff. And back then I did not see the reason why not to do that. It was not demonstrated, so to speak. And I came to Twitter to figure out what the fuck went wrong with Bitcoin development, really. Because for a while things progressed, and then it seemed to stop, and we stopped doing anything scaling related whatsoever. It was like people capitulated on the idea that people will hold their own keys, and everyone just accepted that we will be banged, and that's it, right? And that's like a complete anathema to Bitcoin and where this came from, and my understanding, which again comes from like 2011 and onward, right? I did not know what to make of this. But you want me to get banged? That's what I'm trying to get away from. Yeah.
So when it comes to, I just also like, I'm curious, have you read like the cash token spec and stuff? Because I know Bitcoin Cash Orders has been telling you about that, and obviously being like a technical dev, it would be great to get, like we already did with the other side of the Lightning Network. If you have any thoughts on
people sent me links, but I didn't get very much in depth with it, because like I said, I'm trying to think of ways. The primary motivation for me to be engaged with this whole thing is to scale the native Bitcoin use as money, and the self-store and store of value. And it kind of seems to me that Cash Tokens is going into a different direction. It is trying to explore this DeFi, casino, Ethereum-like use case, to be honest. And that was again surprising to me. I thought that the Bcash people are laser focused on the peer-to-peer cash thing. That's
yes
how
and no.
I find them in my head.
I mean, in my mind, it's not really that clear cut, because essentially a lot of the big blockers ended up in ETH, right? As a result of the scaling, issues, and now some of them are off on their own tangent, right? But I'm not super surprised. Like, I've always been more open-minded to that kind of stuff, and I think the BCH community is now finding a good balance where we can see the importance of that demand. Like, we tried so many years of just cash, if you'll have it that way, and with like physical merchant adoption and stuff, and that didn't really produce the results that we needed, although that's for a lot of other reasons. Other cryptos, Dash or Monero or Lightning Network, it's all struggled in that arena just because crypto is not well suited to fighting in a physical environment, right?
Yeah, so I understand what you mean. The merchant adoption is very disappointing, and especially it was very disappointing a few years back. So I totally understand that you saw that the real demand lies for the casino. Like, people want to gamble.
I don't think it's so much the casino. I think there's an element to that, right? You have to be able to capitalize that, and like you say, ironically, BTC has ended up with a lot of it, even though they don't want it. But as like Fix the Tracking is saying in the comments, an electronic cash system, and then Bitcoin Cash orders has just said a lot about that. And it is true, like the idea, at least in my mind, smart contracts and all that stuff, like the scripting language was built in from the beginning. So it's a weird. We're now forming a middle ground, though, because, the BSV people are even more like, oh, just enable everything, unlimited block size, just embed whatever in there, and it'll be the world's greatest, like, Google Drive.
I really don't want to give up script. Like the scripting capabilities that Bitcoin have roughly, I mean, I'm not satisfied with the current set that we have. I think we should have worked on making it better. But the idea to have this non-Turing complete, very limited and very purpose-made, but still very powerful and expressive scripting language, I think that's a good trade-off. We should stick to that. I'm really against removing the scripting capability of Bitcoin, and I think Bitcoin Cash generally did a very good job on just making the VM expressive enough for this kind of thing without going full Ethereum with it. I actually like that. I like the introspection, of course, like the changes generally that you made to the scripting VM. And I even trolled a few people with this, suggesting that we just adopt the Bcash script VM to Bitcoin in a new script version and be done with this whole bike shedding thing, because it works there. Let's just take it. But of course, it's very hard now because I think it's kind of inseparable from the cash tokens thing. And I'm pretty sure that is not going to sit well with Bitcoiners.
No, I'm very sure it won't either. So go on.
Yeah, I do think it's funny with all the inscriptions and BRC tokens and all that. Like, we already did this kind of thing with SLP token. The wall that everyone is going to find is that the indexers suck.
They're already finding it. There was guys making threads about it the other day. Whatever his name is, Todd.btc, whatever the fuck, Trevor.
So why don't these laser eye people start marketing Bcash and say, if you want to do your tokens, go do it over there. We'll accept
but
you.
Then they'll say, go fuck yourself. They're not going to swallow that, though.
Yeah, I think most of us would love that. Like, we would love that, and you probably would also love that, right? Like, you want to prove yourself under similar demand conditions. Like, you want to show that you can scale with large blocks and you can keep the system working and decentralized enough. And we want to be focused on really the Bitcoin native economic use and trying to be as conservative and as efficient with block space as possible. And somehow we are both frustrated with this. What is going on? Like, it's just not going our way.
Bitcoin is always surprising. I think that's really what it comes down to. Right. So we have our last segment that we have for every guest, message to the community. What do you think the Bitcoin Cash community needs to hear?
Sorry, I did not answer your question. What would make me go over to Bcash?
Well, you can throw that in there if you want.
I'm sorry.
No. Go. What do you think?
If Bitcoin has basically cut out and just go along with regulatory capture and the financialization of Bitcoin, I'm absolutely not interested in that. Like, if Bitcoin turns into basically a stock traded on regulated exchanges and held in these custodial pools, I understand that its price can go up a lot and it might make sense to hold it. But I'm not interested in that whatsoever. Like at that point, I think Bitcoin Cash is the closest thing to the Bitcoin that I'm interested in. Even though, like I said, this cash token thing doesn't seem like my thing, and I did not get into it deeply. There might actually be like very, very interesting use cases, even for like smart contracts involving, various things. Because I also believe that we have a huge problem with, not having a digital fiat that is outside the control of the governments. Like kind of thing that for any serious Bitcoinization, you need an intermediate period where you have free peer-to-peer exchange that is unregulated and impossible to regulate and capture. People need to be able to move in and out, especially merchants and other people who have fiat expenses but want to accept Bitcoin and want to participate in the ecosystem, but they still need to get in and out. And in that, so I'm not someone that says do not use anything other than Bitcoin. I understand that we have this intermediate period where you have to make somehow digital fiat accessible to people that they can hold somehow and trade with it again in anonymous and peer-to-peer fashion. And I understand that the most likely motivation to do that would be tax avoidance and money laundering. I understand that and I accept that. Like that's just what motivates people to go around these things. And that's why governments want to do everything they can to stop it. But I also kind of think that Bitcoin needs this to exist. So I'm not 100% against tokens. I have told people many times that tokens are just transferable authorizations. There is nothing inherently wrong with them, even though a bunch of scams have popped up, in the past years. Bitcoin has used the word token as a swear word or something very nasty, I have tried to tell them that's not so, but still, I'm only really interested in scaling the ownership and transfer of Bitcoin, the native asset. Like that's kind of what I'm married to ideologically, and that's the reason why I'm not as interested in the cash token things. But I'm talking to great guys like Bitcoin, Bcash Otis, what's his name?
Yeah, Bitcoin Cash Otis, yeah.
Bitcoin Cash Otis, sorry, yeah. Yeah, and I'm talking to guys at that, and they are great and all, and they are doing interesting things with these contracting primitives and capabilities, and I have nothing against that. Again, just not what I'm most interested in, if you wish. But again, like I said, if I have to choose between like holding a stock and having like peer-to-peer cash that also does these weird things, and people are playing with NFTs and whatnot, like it's kind of a no-brainer for me to tolerate that.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to have was that sort of your message to the community, or do you want one more stab on any other unrelated or related topic of summarizing?
Message to the Bitcoin Cash community.
Yes.
I think I can only reiterate on that to say you don't want the ETFs. Trust me, like you don't want that bullshit. I hope you can stay focused on peer-to-peer electronic cash. Like that's I think the most important thing. Someone has to carry that flag. If Bitcoin falls, if Bitcoin fails, if we somehow do not manage to do that in Bitcoin, someone has to take on the mantle and carry on the torch and just somehow this cypherpunk dream has to live on somewhere. And like I said, overall, I really like what happened with the script VM of Bcash, and even though I do not agree with the unlimited block size, I think that's kind of a mistake. But it can actually work out. Like the timeline can actually work out in such a way where Bcash is flying under the radar long enough, and it's not being used and abused to the degree while this regulatory pushback is coming. And once that is over and we somehow break free of that tyranny, and we manage to scale and decentralize the broadband global internet infrastructure, then it suddenly might not be such a huge problem. And of course, we need to do things like zero sync and stuff like that to do away with the initial block download burden. And we can expect these technologies all to progress and they can mature, like say in 10 years or whatever. And I think ideally you would want to somehow be able to come out on top of that. So that's kind of my message to focus on that, I guess.
Yeah, no, great, great thoughts. I think that's very interesting. Okay, so we got to give our supporter appreciation as always. Thanks to our donators. Thank you to our patrons, Ricky HP and Digital Seco. Thank you to our sponsor, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com. Thank you to our Flipstarter contributors, Majumali Marcelo, Molecular, Shadow of Harbinger, Turek, Emergent Reasons, Imaginary Username, Cheapy, Cheap Landing, Pat, Mini Satoshi, Sandakisman, Marius. So thank you everybody for watching. You of course have the start guide, FAQs, and links at www.bitcoincashpodcast.com. If you're new, check out episode 85, and of course try out Selene Wallet at selene.cash. So shout outs for this week. Moonsettler, where can people find more of you, and is there anything you want to give a shout out to?
Generally, I'm mostly on Twitter and starting to engage on GitHub, but that's dev stuff and might not be as interesting because our particular woes and difficulties are of no real interest to the Bitcoin Cash community, because you have a different culture and different issues. You do not have this gatekeeping bullshit that we have to deal with. So I don't think it's that interesting.
Fair enough. Jet, do you have any shout outs?
Just a happy birthday shout out to Brian.
Okay, happy birthday to Brian. And my shout outs, I've got two. One to you, Moonsettler. Thank you for coming on. You've been mentioned on the show a couple times previously, so great to have you here to step in the ring and give your own opinion. And I think for some of the listeners, I think it will be especially invaluable, certainly some of those takes on Lightning Network as well and stuff, because I'm here on this show, talking trash about it all the time, and several of our other guests too. So it's good for people to be able to hear at least, the argument from an advocate, for somebody who kind of believes in it more, so that they can make up their own mind on the balance of the facts. So I think that's really important. And my second shout is to Bitcoin Cash Orders, who has done an amazing job of helping to break down the barriers between the two communities, and everybody has a project that they like. So yeah, that's great.
He's a great guy, absolutely.
I guess one more shout out. I want to tag along with Jeremy's shout out to you, Moonsettler, and also Polly D. I feel like you two are the two BTC folks that I can have technical discussions with and not have it degrade into an argument and just name calling and price charts and stuff.
Because that's the PTSD from the block size wars, right? It actually took me a while to overcome that, and what really helped is I developed this huge empathy for what you went through when, of course, I got into a similar situation. Let's face it. And when you clash horns with the gatekeepers and people like Adam Beck, you understand what you are dealing with suddenly, and again that helped me understand kind of your motivations better, I believe, and that helped me develop this empathy for that. And again, seeing what a great job you did with the script VM again made me like reevaluate the entire project. And it took me quite a while. I'm pretty sure people can find tweets where I was calling cashies idiots and stuff like that. So it's not something that I was born with. I absolutely bought into that bullshit in 2017, 2018. Especially the grave right stuff, right? That really set people off, I believe.
Justifiably so.
Yeah, that really triggered an immune response. But I think I got better, and I hope more Bitcoiners can get better and get over this this bullshit. I have no better word for it. Like I accept now that the Bcash people, Bitcoin Cash people are Bitcoiners also. Like I see them more like estranged brothers than the enemy.
Yes,
But
the cousins.
it takes effort. Like I don't think people who don't want to get healed can just magically get healed. Like you have to take the steps.
Yeah. No, it takes time, and yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, we agree the whole CSW side of it, and we might be seeing some action on that shortly with the Copa trial. But there was at least today there was Calvin Air coming out. They were I can't even tell if this is serious or not, but they're apparently rebranding to UBSV. What was it called? Unbounded BSV. Apparently BSV.
Wow.
No, it's now unbounded BSV. So
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what they're doing there, but
I guess Bitcoin Unlimited is already taken. So
yeah, exactly. I thought, unleashed Bitcoin, or they're always like, it's unleashed. We've unleashed ourselves. Well, apparently unbounded. So anyway, good luck to them with that strategy. I'm glad we've got our brand and there's no need to change it. So settle down on that. Anyone in the BCH community who's feeling in that direction. Right. That will do it for the show. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.
So I started realizing that if you can just find strength just a little bit longer, you will have a crew of people following you along the way.
And that is another thing that no one can ever teach you. Because you're going to have to learn that on your own. You're going to have to figure out how to pull that energy out of your mind on your own. There's no book you can read that all of a sudden I have it. I've got the technique.